Welcome to the Meta Business Podcast. The Metaverse and Web3 are bringing about the biggest revolution since the internet itself. With your hosts, Paul the Prophet Dawalibi and Jeff the Juice Cohen, we will be bringing you the latest Metaverse business news and insight into what it all means. The Meta Business Podcast starts now.
From the boardroom to the Metaverse, this is the Meta Business Podcast. I am Paul Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, Jeff the Juice Cohen. For those of you who are new here, welcome to the official podcast of the Metaverse. What we do is we cover the most interesting topics and stories from the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this amazing industry. For those of you who are new here, welcome. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Go on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, wherever you listen to this, hit the subscribe or follow button. It'll alert you when a new episode drops. And leave a review. If you love the content, leave a review, 5-star rating and review. It really helps others to find the podcast. Jeff, how you doing this week?
I'm doing well. You know, not as good as last week. You know, at this time last week, you were scrambling around the office trying to assemble the studio so we could record our live stream, which we do after we record this, that everyone should of course check out. But yeah, you were scrambling around trying to set it up because Lindsay, our other co-host, on the Business of Esports live stream, and I surprised Paul and showed up at his office basically last minute, said, hey, let's record this all in person. So Paul scrambled around for about an hour while Lindsay and I ate pizza, and then we got it done, and it was awesome.
It was a lot of fun, I will say. I got to admit, in the moment, it wasn't fun scrambling, but the end result was fun. And I've got so much feedback from viewers saying like it was the most fun podcast. It was so much more like animated and like everyone was more aggressive, right? Because when you're in the same room, there's not this physical barrier. It definitely was a lot of fun. I will say, for those, if you're a fan of this podcast, maybe you discovered this because you're, an enthusiast around what's going on around the metaverse, or you're looking to learn. We also do this other podcast called The Business of Esports, which you should go check out, which is more gaming and esports focused, and Meta Woman, which is a podcast focused entirely on highlighting and elevating women within the gaming and metaverse industry. So definitely go check out, subscribe to all three: Meta Business, Meta Woman, and Business of Esports. I promise you will love all the content. Jeff, let's jump into some news here, because I think that I love when we've gotten to the point here where we're starting to get some recurring themes, right? And some discussion that I think gets deeper and deeper every time we revisit, but also just some cool news stories. And I think we always try and start with a fun story. And this one, obviously you flagged this, caught my eye. Big name in metaverse news and a very big headline. And the headline here is Manchester City to build Ethiad Stadium in the metaverse. So the celebrated soccer team has begun the initial stages of building its iconic home stadium in the metaverse so fans can be part of live and recorded matches around the world. They're going to build this virtual replica of their stadium, Ethiad Stadium. It'll be the team's central hub in the metaverse. They signed a 3-year agreement with Sony, who's going to provide, it says, virtual reality to experts to use image analysis and skeletal tracking technology. So fans should be able to enjoy games and watch games in this, what they call immersive metaverse setting. I will just read the quote because I think it's interesting. The quote here from the chief marketing officer at Man City says, "The whole point we could imagine of having a metaverse is you can recreate a game, you could watch the game live, you're part of the action in a different way through different angles, and you can fill the stadium as much as you want because it's unlimited. It's completely virtual." Where would you rank? So I feel like we're going to need some kind of ranking system, like a board, right? Where this is like pure metaverse, and like on one end of the scale, and on the other end of the scale, it's sort of like fake metaverse is the wrong term, but like a small step and a big step metaverse, right?
Yeah.
Where are you putting this? And is this just glorified VR that we're calling metaverse? Like, do you like this? Curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm on the fence here, and I hate to do this and play sort of both sides because I am the juice, and I like to have this persona where regardless of how strong I actually feel, I like to go all in on one side or the other. Usually, just whichever side the opposite of the person who just spoke is. I'm Mr. Devil's Advocate in that way, but I'll sort of give both sides here. I mean, on one hand, I like the fact that they're experimenting with this. I think whenever you're a brand and you're getting into a new space and you're innovating, cool. I think we should be supporting that. We should be applauding that. I also like the fact that it's adding accessibility, right? If you're Man City or is this Man City or Man?
Yeah, Man City. Yeah.
So, if you're a team like Man City and you have literally hundreds of millions of fans around the world, many, many, many of them have never been and probably will never get the opportunity to go to your amazing cathedral of a stadium. With the metaverse, you now give them the opportunity to do that. Maybe it increases fanhood. They go and now they want to buy a jersey because they went and felt like they were really part of the team. So from that respect, I like it. It's cool. It's accessible. It's forward thinking. What I don't like about it is pretty much everything else, and kind of what you just talked about, where I don't know. It's a novelty thing, and maybe people do it once, and it's a cool thing to have done. But I don't see this as replacing the experience of going to a football stadium in real life. And I don't even think it's particularly exciting in the sense of it doesn't seem to me to be bringing more to the table. Like one of the things we've always come back to when we're talking about the metaverse and digital worlds is we're always somewhat bearish about creating real world experiences in digital space. I get that the metaverse will have aspects of that, but there's just something that's not that exciting about walking around a digital shopping mall or digital supermarket or digital soccer stadium because we can do those things in real life. One of the great things about games is you can do and experience things that you can't do in real life. So put me in the action, make me the view of the ball, make me, fly above the stadium in a helicopter or something. Like those are the kinds of things that I think would be more interesting to me. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of both sides. Where do you fall?
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious. I was going to say the same thing about flying over. It's funny you said that, but like, I'm curious how true like this replica is going to be because they talk about they're taking dimensions of the stadium, the whole bit. Like, does that mean some people will actually have to sit in the bleachers, right? Like, will everyone be able to occupy the best seat in the house, or are they going to fill this metaverse version of their stadium the same way they fill the physical version? And some people are going to have good seats and some are going to have horrible seats. Like, I'm trying to put like this scale together where one is like I'm put on VR goggles to go shopping at Walmart in virtual reality, right? That's like we'll call it how metaversey is something, right? The metaversey scale. You've got one which is shopping at Walmart in VR on one end.
So basically doing experiences you do in real life, but just in a virtual world.
Right. And like 10 is, and it's not just replicating virtual, like real life, like the most mundane of real life experiences, right? Like shopping at Walmart. And 10 would be like the Oasis from Ready Player One, right? Like something like that. So, you've got this, how metaversey is something. Where would we put this? It feels a little bit like a 2 or a 3, maybe, right? Depending on the execution. I just think it's such a miss, to your point, right? Like, where's the flying above the play? And I would argue, why, if we're putting the audience in the metaverse, why not the players too, right? Like, why don't we put them on omnidirectional treadmills with VR headsets, and they're no longer playing in real life. They're playing in a virtual, metaverse also. Why are we limiting this to just the people in attendance and watching? It doesn't go far enough. I think this, on this scale, anything below a 5 feels like we're not moving the ball forward. We're not, this is sort of a brand activation more than actually getting us closer to capital T, capital M metaverse, the metaverse, right?
I would agree with that.
It's funny though, because Man City, soccer what do you think was the impetus for Man City to do this? Right, you're in the boardroom at Man City. Is this a marketing exercise, you think?
I think it is. And I actually, as you were scrolling, I think it looked like they had a sponsorship with Tezos, the blockchain company. So, as we know, there's a ton of overlap between sports fans, blockchain enthusiasts, and people who are interested in the metaverse. All three of them kind of overlap a ton. I said interlap. That's not even a word. So yeah, they have this partnership with Tezos. So
it was actually Manchester United that had the Tezos partnership that they mentioned, which is their rival, right? So
maybe they wanted to one up the rival then.
Yeah.
Which it seems like they did, because this is way cooler than just a simple partnership.
But I think you're right. Like, it doesn't hurt anyone, right? And there is an accessibility play here of getting more fans. Some people may say, does that mean it will cannibalize the real life version, right? If we replicate real life experiences in the metaverse one for one, is there cannibalization that's going to happen with the real life experience?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the answer would be no, at least at this stage. I think what you're doing is expanding. It's like saying, hey, basketball games are on TV. Does that mean that people never want to go to basketball games again? And in some instances, maybe it cuts down demand a little bit, but overall it grows the pie in terms of people viewing the sport, and overall, these are for-profit companies. Overall dollars that come to the team or the organization are clearly higher, having the broadcast right. So I think it would be very similar to that, in the sense that it grows the amount of people that it can engage with your fan base, your brand.
All right, let's move on. Let's talk about Dapper Labs in the news. And I think this is an interesting story. It's the headline here. I've never thought I would see this word actually in a headline, especially from a pretty mainstream magazine like Fast Company. It says, how Dapper Labs is making Web3 safe for normies with help from the NBA, UFC, and La Liga. The pioneering company behind CryptoKitties and NBA Top Shot won't rest until 3 billion people are customers. So basically this is talking about, I'll just summarize. It's a bit of a puff piece, but they're talking about how Dapper Labs, who's the company behind CryptoKitties and NBA Top Shot, is really focused on making Web3, specifically the buying of NFTs, so much more accessible for, call it what they call normies, like just normal everyday people who aren't hardcore crypto enthusiasts or hardcore techies. And the idea is they want to introduce the idea of collecting these scarce digital assets to millions or billions of people, right? That's part of the vision for the company. Do you buy this, Jeff? Like, do you think this is a reasonable approach to the sector?
100%. I mean, 100. I think when you think about it, whether they will eventually ultimately be successful is up in the air. You could argue they already have been. I mean, in the last year, one of the most successful, if not the most successful kind of NFT projects or NFT things was NBA Top Shot. It brought probably several million people into the ecosystem that were sort of first time crypto, engagers, if you will. Now, a big part of that was the fact that they, and they even say in the article, one of the things that I thought was pretty interesting was that in the branding for NBA Top Shot, they didn't really emphasize crypto. They didn't really emphasize the blockchain. It was sort of, hey, this is an easy user experience. You can use a credit card. You can buy these things with that. You don't need to create 5 different wallets and stuff and stuff like the user experiences for many NFT games. That just creates a really frictionful experience and that people generally, tap out of. I think they even said there was some place in the article, maybe you could search for it, where they were talking about how at one point there was only 2% of people that were trying to buy items were able to buy items. Maybe it was when they had their prior game, CryptoKitties, basically highlighting when you have a bad user experience, you basically lose a lot of people within that. Maybe you could read that, Paul.
Yeah, no, the quote is, we were seeing close to a 2% conversion rate from someone clicking on, I want this cat, to being able to buy the cat, which is...
so that was their prior game. So they were the people behind CryptoKitties, which, was really the first big NFT launch back in 2017. That, in fact, I think at one point they were like 30% of the usage on the Ethereum blockchain was CryptoKitties, which is just insane. But the quote here is saying how the conversion rate from people who said, yeah, I want to buy this cat to actually buying it was 2%, which is,
Whoa.
anyone who knows e-commerce, shockingly bad. Like
Yeah.
that's horrible. And that's because you needed to download a MetaMask wallet. You needed to put cash, Ether into that wallet, then you'd have to buy it. So what they did with the Flow blockchain is, they have a custodial wallet, so people don't need to kind of control the crypto themselves, which is something that many crypto enthusiasts I know have pushed back on the Flow blockchain, which is the blockchain that Dapper Labs has built themselves, and which is what NBA Top Shot is built off of. And they're now trying to get more games and companies to build upon. I know that was a problematic thing for many like hardcore crypto people, but for normie, quote unquote normies, as this article said, I think that that's a really important part of the equation. So yeah, I think the mission is the right mission. I think it's the right way to go about it, and to some extent they've already succeeded. It will be interesting to see what sort of the follow up is with Top Shot, because the GMV volumes in terms of secondary trading market for that game have gone down, call it 90% from the peak. So it's definitely, tailed off. It'll be interesting to see what they follow it up with.
It's a fascinating story. That 2% statistics really telling. It definitely points to an accessibility problem, right? Like an ease of use, user experience problem. I think the issue I have with these stories, this theme of story, is it feels like user experience and accessibility has become a crutch for people in this industry. Like it's the distraction. If we only solve the user experience and the accessibility, billions will be buying NFTs and 4-second clips of people doing a dunk, and right, like it's only because it's complicated that we only have a few million, right? Like if it was only easier, we could get billions and billions of people. And my frustration is this crutch takes away from having a legitimate conversation around what is the true size of this market, right? For pure digital collectibles, which is what Dapper Labs does, right? I don't think there's any utility to any of these things. It's
so I was going to say, and sorry to cut you off. I mean, so right now, I mean, NBA Top Shot is pure digital collectibles, but one of the things they're trying to do, and a lot of, this kind of ties into, Web3 gaming, is they're trying to build like either a fantasy sports platform or something where you could then use some of these things in games. And the question I was going to pose to you is like, how realistic is that? Can you do that without just making it be entirely pay to win? Like, do you think that's an ecosystem where, like, does fantasy sports work when you can own the assets? It kind of inherently becomes pay to win, I think.
I mean, I could just buy all the best players, no? Yeah. And then, I mean, this is a problem with that whole space in its entirety. But I want to come back to the fact that we lose sight of maybe there are other variables here, right? And because everyone has zeroed in on, and everyone thinks they're very clever, and I hear at all these, panels and whatever, oh, it's a user experience, it's, and the MetaMask thing is always the one people go to, right? It's like MetaMask, I kind of feel bad for the guys at MetaMask. They're literally the industry punching bag for like describing something complicated. Maybe there are other issues, like maybe 3 billion people don't want, a virtual basketball card. Like maybe they don't want that. And so maybe they do. I'm not taking one side or the other. It's just the crutch here allows everyone to avoid the conversation of, are there demand problems? Like, is there not enough benefit to the end user? Is that benefit not communicated clearly enough, right? Like there's all kinds of other potential business issues that stops you from getting to that 3 billion kind of owner mark that aren't related to complication of the platform.
I agree. I mean, I do agree on that. And I don't think that 3 billion people will want, to buy digital collectibles. But I think the hope is, well, I know it, from the article and just in general, I think it's, hey, 3 billion people coming into this ecosystem, and there will, some of them will want digital collectibles, some will want digital art, some will want digital games, some will want, fantasy sports on the blockchain, some will want betting on the blockchain, some will want, yada, yada, yada. I think that's the vision. And I do like what you are saying is correct, that accessibility is necessary but not sufficient. Like, something could be super accessible and the greatest user experience in the world, but if it's not interesting and not fun as an entertainment product, it doesn't matter, like, at all.
Jeff, let me ask maybe a stupid question, because I consider myself the dumb one on this here. Like, what is the total addressable size of this market for something like NBA Top Shot, right? Would it not just be the total addressable market size of basketball trading cards? Like, why, what is the strength of the argument that says more people will care to buy this than care to buy physical trading cards?
I think I'm struggling to find a really great example. I feel like
the nature of being digital
do a good job with this, but there are plenty of examples. I feel like that things went from analog to digital, and the market size was way bigger, than people expected. Like, you could say, hey, at the end of the day, like, strategy games are really just board games. Like, why is mobile strategy like a $50 billion category when, like, board games are like we're never bigger than $1 billion. So I think it's hard to always make that analogy, but I definitely see your.
All right, let's move on here. We've got an interesting fundraising story here, and then actually, before we get to the fundraising story, this one is sort of a recurring theme of NFT marketplaces piggybacking on nostalgia, I guess. I don't know what the play is here, but this is Limewire in the news, and I guarantee like 80% of our audience probably has no clue what Limewire is.
That's literally the oldest I've ever felt.
But the headline here: Limewire is back as an NFT marketplace. It's, again, and look at the subheadline. It's designed to cater to folks who don't have any crypto. So Limewire, which was, at the, call it, early days of the internet, was a name that was very well recognized, right? Focused on music and, streaming music, mostly illegally, if I remember correctly.
It didn't feel illegal, but it was.
They're coming back as an NFT marketplace. They're relaunching as what they call, I'm quoting here, mainstream ready digital collectibles marketplace for art and entertainment, initially focusing on music. So the backers believe it'll be a place for artists and fans to create and sell digital trinkets without the technical hurdles of the current NFT marketplace. Obviously, they want to target this at musicians and NFT newbies. And they're using this, I guess, nostalgic brand. We talked about the GameStop one. How do you rank this against that, if you do, or what are the thoughts on 100 more marketplaces banking on nostalgia?
So my first thought is that I don't really understand why they're going after kind of non-crypto enthusiasts, because if I were to think, just about Limewire, I mean, it was a peer-to-peer file sharing technology. It was a little bit on the gray, like the dark web gray area to some extent. Like, I have to imagine that there's a pretty big overlap between people who use Limewire very actively and people who are into crypto. Just feels like it's that kind of, computer, dark web type people, or at least early adopters of crypto. Maybe that's obviously not the case anymore. So that part was a little bit confusing to me, but I had thought I was going to hate this, same way I hated GameStop one. And I still do think I hate this one, but I think it's interesting that they're focused. I think we had a long discussion about kind of my view on verticalization and how, all these NFT markets were eventually going to splinter into kind of verticalized deep marketplaces. So I kind of like the fact that they're focusing on music. And then if you play it through, Limewire has a brand in music. So, to some extent, could they be the NFT marketplace for music? I think I could buy that. If we have the three, we had Blockbuster, we had GameStop, and this one, I think I was fairly bullish on GameStop relatively. Blockbuster, no, that was just a pure nostalgia play. I don't really get it. This one, I think I could see, the music argument makes a little sense. Where it breaks down for me, though, is why would someone buy an NFT of music? Like, we kind of moved past buying music, right? Like, everything's streamed now. I'm not sure who wants to buy digital music. Like, it's sort of like we've that business model was correct 20 years ago. If 20 years ago you were selling NFTs of digital music, like maybe I could see that being a better, proposition for consumers. Like I just don't know if there's a market for buying digital music at this point.
It could be music related art. But this, like, does this make you more convinced of this like verticalization of these NFT marketplaces? Like, are you more and more convinced that the end result, the if we fast forward 5 years, there's 2 or 3 dozen big NFT marketplaces that all are massively sort of focused on one vertical, whether it's music or game or whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm highly convicted on that. The only reason why I have a little bit of a pause is that we're sort of going through the whole evolution in like fast forward, where normally it's like the market starts small, you have one massive aggregator like the OpenSea becomes this dominant behemoth, which it sort of has. It has a massive amount of market share in NFTs, but we're so early in the game, like it feels like it needs to like become more of a behemoth before it splinters off and gets niched. But I do think that that's where this is headed. I mean, you just have to look at what happened with eBay, Craigslist. Like there's, whole VC funds have been created around like the splintering of Craigslist and all the different platforms that have been spawned off the back of that. So I do think that's where this is headed. And it's probably not a controversial take. That's why a lot of these things are getting funded. I'm sure there's plenty of VCs that have the same thesis. But yeah.
Yeah. It feels like there's going to be some consolidation, right? I don't know if there's enough space for every single one of these very, highly niche markets. And I worry about the intersection of the people who know the Limewire brand and the ones who care to buy music related NFTs. I'm a little concerned that those two in the Venn diagram, those two circles, while they do intersect, the intersection may be small. Because even obviously I remember the name LimeWire, and I was around when it was popular, Napster days, Kazaa, all those kinds of, programs. But it doesn't like say much to me. I don't get warm and fuzzy feelings from the brand that makes me absolutely want to go there. So it's an interesting play. It'll be interesting to see how it pans out. But let's go to our last story here. Jevin, this is a big raise, really big raise, and at a huge valuation. And the headline from CoinDesk is NFT platform Immutable raises $200 million at $2.5 billion valuation. The round was led by Singapore sovereign wealth fund Temasek, and most of the funding is going to be used for global expansion. Now, there were other participants in the round. I'll just name some of them: Mirai Asset, Parify Capital, Declaration Partners, Tencent Holdings, a name we know well from the gaming space, obviously. And Immutable raised money just back in September. So that would have been like 6 months ago, at a $410 million valuation. So more than 5x, 6x, right? 6x increase in valuation in 6 months. And that was a $60 million raise. So, hundreds of millions of dollars raised, massive increase in the valuation. They develop 2 popular NFT games, according to this article, Gods Unchained and Guild of Guardians. I don't play either. But they also created Immutable X, which is a layer 2 NFT infrastructure platform for businesses to build games, marketplaces, and applications. Here's my question for you. This is primarily sort of a blockchain-based gaming play. Their platform and infrastructure play. I'm sure the VCs and the investors in this were very interested in that. But all we have to go on today, I think, are these 2 games that they have out. Where, I feel like AAA game studios building games for PCs that are massively multiplayer, AAA graphics, right? Would struggle to spend, and I'm exaggerating, but would struggle to spend $200 million, right, on a game. Where does Immutable put all this capital, right? Because these are relatively simple games in the grand scheme of game development. where does all this go in your mind, Jeff? That's what worries me here.
It's a little bit of a conundrum. There's so much capital flowing into the space. I mean, I imagine most of that goes to building the infrastructure, building out their blockchain solution, or literally their blockchain. I do know they also were the ones actually that I think GameStop partnered with, to do sort of what they're doing. So there's a little bit deeper than just some of these games. Also, I think that Gods Unchained, even though I haven't played it, I do know I think it's one of the more popular kind of these NFT games. So maybe they do have some sort of secret sauce here in terms of they're going to be the winning platform to build games on. I know there's, we every week we seem to be talking about a different blockchain, whether it's, Flow from Dapper Labs, Solana, or Polygon, which obviously hired Ryan Wyatt, former head of YouTube Gaming and kind of a gaming luminary. So there's a lot of people going after this same prize. I would love to, to understand a little better. Maybe this is a homework assignment for me, but just what the value proposition is for developers on each of these different blockchains, because they can't all win, right? We're not. Eventually, I think there will be one or two maybe standards, and if you think of these, and maybe this isn't even the right analogy, but as like almost gaming engines or gaming platforms. There's not that many out there, if we think about traditional gaming, right? You have Unity, you have Unreal on the engine side. Maybe there's two or three others that sort of have a small bit of market share. And then on the kind of platform side, you have obviously the consoles, you have PC, and then you have kind of mobile. Like, does blockchain just become like that fifth or fourth platform? And then if it is, like, is there room for 10 of them? Is there room for 3 of them? Is there room for 2 of them? Is there room for 1 of them? I don't have a great view or thesis on that. It's something I have to do more thinking or work on. I'm curious if you have a formulated opinion.
I feel like there are more platforms than there are actual games or applications for these platforms. Right? Like, there are literally, if you look at the ecosystem right now, you have more choice. If you're a developer of blockchain-based games, you have more choice in terms of platform than competition in terms of games. And I feel like at some point we reach saturation, and at some point we need to see $200 million, and we've seen raises, right? Game developers raising huge amounts of money to build blockchain-based games or play to earn games. But where are the games, right? Like, lots of interesting platforms. Where are the great games? Seems to that piece of the equation still is very much missing in my mind. And so I'm a little worried, right, that everyone's building these fabulous palaces with no one to live in them. And they're very expensive palaces, right? This $2.5 billion valuation. I don't know how you justify a 6 times increase other than maybe competitive pressure to get into the deal if you're an investor. Like, where's the justification that this company has increased 6 times over 6 months, right? What have they done in 6 months to justify that massive increase when, again, they're not the only game in town? There are other platforms that do exactly this. And it's not like there's 10,000 developers all wanting to make games, and there's just so much demand for these platforms. I would rather see the games drive sort of some of the news around these platforms, right? I want to see a big successful game say, we used Immutable, and you should too, right? Like, in the same way with Roblox, you get these stories of, this 16-year-old developer is making like $300,000 a month. I just don't see that as much here. And I assume that's because it's not happening. But that's where I have concerns. I think it's also it means, blockchain-based games, play to earn games are here to stay. When you have this much money invested at these kinds of high valuations, something like Immutable is not going anywhere tomorrow. There's real conviction that the ecosystem is going to fill out and people will develop for this platform.
So I think, your point is a good one. I think it does highlight to me probably just how early we are. And you and I, we've been talking about this for a number of months, but it's still, to use the tried and true, famous baseball example, I don't even think we're in the first inning here. Like, we haven't even gotten to the starting line of the race. And maybe that's what it is. But the question I guess posed back to you is, when does it really become concerning? Because I think, this all, let's call it the last year, really started getting hyped up. Then you had the VCs notice, they start funding these things. Then these things start, I think a lot of this money will probably go to developers, right? So all these blockchains have effectively VC arms. They're funding developers. It is a great time to be a blockchain gaming developer. You name your price. I mean, it's just insane. But then these guys have to go make a game, which in AAA world, that could take 2-3 years. This is obviously not going to be that. So maybe it's called a year. But my point is there's a lot of lead time. So when do we really start getting concerned where it's like, hey, there's 100 of these games actually coming out, not white papers, not Discord servers, like real games that people are playing. And it's just like, this stuff isn't very good. Like where are we on that curve?
Well, so I like your baseball analogy. So let me run with it. If we're in the first inning, what has happened is we're in the first inning and everyone has built massive stadiums, right? Like everyone has just built these most palatial, massive stadiums, but there's no one in the seats yet, right? And so by the second, third inning, if there's no one in the seats, you might go, okay, no big deal, slow burn, right? Like if we're halfway through the game and there's no one in the seats, I think this is when you start to worry. What is that in terms of years? I think you have to look at sort of a game life cycle, right? So what's the average time to develop a AAA game? I don't know, 3 years, maybe 4 years, something like that these days, right? It's getting longer and longer. Let's say it's 3 years. If in 3 years, we don't have a Fortnite type breakout blockchain based game or play to earn game, if we don't have that level of hit, I think in 3-4 years, then I think alarm bells need to start ringing.
100. Well, that's a lot more runway than I thought. I thought you were going to give it like months. Like I was thinking like a quarter or two, like 3-4 years. Yeah. I mean, if we don't have a hit and then like go home, like it's over. Yeah. I was thinking by the summer.
I mean, I can almost guarantee that will not happen. Like to me, those short term, like there's nothing on the horizon that makes me believe they have figured out how to make fun games given the constraints of blockchain based or play to earn games. Like I am not convinced at all that it's even possible yet. And so in the short term, I just don't think anyone's going to figure it out. In the long term, I might argue that people are going to figure it out. I just, when people say, like, if you said by the summer, I would take that bet all day long. Like no chance by the summer. That's our time, Jeff. Flies by as always. Just a quick reminder, to our listeners, make sure you subscribe, leave a 5-star rating and review if you love the podcast. Tell your friends, send it to your friends, even better. Share the link with them so they can enjoy the podcast as well. We really appreciate you guys tuning in every week. Jeff, thank you as always. And we will see you all next week.
Thanks for joining us here on Meta Business. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast everywhere you get your podcasts, leave a 5-star review, and tell your friends, family, and colleagues all about us. Also, make sure to follow Meta TV on all socials to get more of the best metaverse content anywhere. Tune in every week for another episode of Meta Business.